until you finish your response before proceeding to the next question. Further, to ensure the court reporter can properly record this deposition, please speak clearly, concisely, and slowly. Also, the court reporter cannot record nonverbal answers such as nodding or shaking your head, so it is important that you answer each question with an audible verbal answer. Do you understand?
I do.
Exhibits may be entered into the record. Majority exhibits will be identified numerically. Minority exhibits will be identified alphabetically. Do you understand?
I do.
We want you to answer our questions in the most complete and truthful manner possible, so we will take our time. If you have any questions or do not fully understand the question, please let us know. We will attempt to clarify, add context to, or rephrase our questions. If we ask about specific conversations or events in the past and you are unable to recall the exact words or details, you should testify to the substance of those conversations or events to the best of your recollection. If you recall only a part of a conversation or event, you should give us your best recollection of those events or parts of conversations that you do recall. Do you understand?
I understand.
You are required by law to answer questions from Congress truthfully. This also applies to questions posed by congressional staff in this deposition. Do you understand?
I do.
If at any time you knowingly make false statements, you could be subject to criminal prosecution, including but not limited to perjury. Do you understand?
I do.
This includes both knowingly providing false testimony, but also stating that you do not recall or remember something when in fact you do. Do you understand?
I do.
Furthermore, you cannot tell half-truths or exclude information necessary to make statements accurate. You are required to provide all information that would make your response truthful. A deliberate failure to disclose information can constitute a false statement. Do you understand?
I do.
Is there any reason you are unable to provide truthful testimony in today's interview?
No.
Please note, if you wish to assert a privilege over any statement today, that assertion must comply with the rules of the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform. Pursuant to that, Committee Rule 16C1 states, for the chair to consider assertions of privilege over testimony or statements, witnesses or entities must clearly state the specific privilege being asserted and the reason for the assertion on or before the scheduled date of testimony or appearance. For the purposes of this deposition, objections must be stated concisely in a non-argumentative and non-suggestive manner. If the witness refuses to answer a question to preserve a privilege, the committee may seek a ruling from the chair. If the chair overrules any such objection, the witness shall be ordered to answer. If the witness continues to refuse to answer a question despite being ordered to do so, the witness may be subject to sanction. Do you understand?
I do.
Ordinarily, we take a 5-minute break at the end of each hour of questioning. But if you need a longer break or a break before that, please let us know, and we will be happy to accommodate. However, to the extent there is a pending question, we would ask that you finish answering the question before we take the break. Do you understand?
I do.
Finally, I will note for everyone here today that the contents of what we discuss in the deposition today is confidential under the House Deposition Regulation. Under the rules, the chairman and ranking minority member shall consult before any release of testimony or transcripts, including portions thereof. This means it is a violation of House and committee rules to disclose the content of the deposition prior to its official release. For this reason, the marked exhibits that we will use today will remain with the court reporter so that they can go into the official transcript, and any copies of those exhibits will be kept at the table or returned to us when we finish. Can the reporter please swear in the witness?
Here is your right hand. Do you solemnly declare or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you give today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Do you have any questions before we begin?
I do not.
We understand that you have an opening statement that you would like to read into the record.
I do, if I may.
You may.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to thank the committee for working with the Epstein estate over the past 6+ months. As a co-executor of the estate, I have done my very best to cooperate with the committee, and to respond to the committee's requests for documents, photographs, and other information relating to Jeffrey Epstein. As you know, the estate produced voluminous materials in response to the committee's subpoena and communicated regularly with both the committee's majority and minority staffs on the timing, scope, and content of the estate's responses. My appearance here today, as with my co-executor's testimony before the committee last week, represents our continuing cooperation with the committee's efforts to investigate matters regarding Mr. Epstein. In addition, since we were appointed in 2019 by the United States Virgin Islands Probate Court as co-executors of Mr. Epstein's estate, we have fully cooperated with the U.S. Department of Justice's investigation of Epstein-related matters. I'd also like to note the extensive efforts that my co-executor and I have made to address the wrongs committed by Mr. Epstein during his lifetime. At our direction, the estate initiated, developed, and funded the Epstein Victims Compensation Program, the first of its kind established by an estate, which provided a private, voluntary, and non-confrontational means to compensate women who suffered sexual abuse by Mr. Epstein. Independently administered by preeminent figures in the field of victims' compensation, the EVCP awarded more than $121 million to 136 women, all of which the estate funded, pursuant to our express direction that 1, there was to be no cap on monies awarded, either individually or in the aggregate, and 2, even women whose claims were time-barred or who had previously signed releases could participate. The estate has also directly settled claims by an additional 59 women for a total of more than $48 million. Including the recently proposed settlement in a putative class action lawsuit filed in 2024 on behalf of all women abused by Mr. Epstein, a settlement that the court preliminary approved earlier this month, my co-executor and I have authorized payment by the Epstein estate of more than $200 million to women who assert they were abused or trafficked by Mr. Epstein. Let me be clear. I had no knowledge whatsoever of Jeffrey Epstein's wrongdoings. My complete lack of involvement in that misconduct is a matter of record. Not a single woman has ever accused me of committing sexual abuse or witnessing sexual abuse, nor claimed at any time that she or anyone else reported to me any allegation of Mr. Epstein's abuse. I did not socialize with Epstein, and I reject as categorically false any suggestion that I knowingly facilitated or assisted Mr. Epstein in his sexual abuse or trafficking of women, or that I was aware of his actions while I provided legal services to him. Far from being Mr. Epstein's lieutenant or chief of staff, as I have been incorrectly described by plaintiffs' lawyers and uninformed journalists, I was one of many attorneys who Mr. Epstein regularly consulted, including such noted luminaries as Kenneth Starr, for entirely legitimate purposes. My primary role was to provide corporate, transactional, and general legal services to Mr. Epstein and his companies, and yes, I did so. The press and plaintiffs' counsel have mischaracterized cash withdrawals I made from Mr. Epstein's bank accounts from 2013 to 2017. Entirely ignored in that reporting is the fact that the bank involved knew full well that these accounts belonged to Mr. Epstein. Neither I nor he made any effort to disguise his name or identity, and as part of its standard policy, the bank itself imposed a $7,500 limit on daily cash withdrawals. I was not attempting to structure such withdrawals to avoid federal reporting requirements. Quite the contrary, I simply sought to comply with the bank's internal requirements and limits, with the bank's full knowledge. It is undisputed that during this time, Mr. Epstein had difficulty accessing credit cards from major banks. Instead, he and his staff required cash to pay for a wide variety of expenses, including maintenance, repairs, and daily household needs for his residential properties in New York, Florida, New Mexico, Paris, and the USVI, as well as meals, gifts, gratuities, and fuel for his private aircraft. For a person of Mr. Epstein's financial position, with 5 multi-million-dollar residences, staffed by dozens of employees, and with an extensive travel itinerary, it did not strike me as unusual that Mr. Epstein's business, household, and personal needs required large amounts of cash on a regular basis. I never believed that the cash I withdrew from Mr. Epstein and his staff was used by Mr. Epstein or his staff for any improper purposes. There have also been allegations of my supposed involvement in facilitating forced or sham marriages between women in Mr. Epstein's life. Those allegations, too, are 100% untrue. I did not arrange, assist, or facilitate any marriages between acquaintances of Mr. Epstein, nor was I aware in advance that such marriages took place. Same-sex marriage has been legal in New York since 2011, with this passage of the Marriage Equality Act. I did not consider it appropriate to interrogate anyone as to the reasons for their decisions to marry or the bona fides of their relationships. I don't mean in any way to condone or excuse Mr. Epstein's reprehensible conduct. Quite the opposite, I condemn it wholeheartedly. Had I known that he was abusing or trafficking women, I would have quit working for him at once and severed all ties to him. The truth is that I did not know what Mr. Epstein did after hours, what he did behind closed doors, and what he did in places where I was not present. I first met Epstein in 1996 when he was already a highly successful businessman. After he pled guilty in 2008 to procuring a person under the age of 18 for prostitution, Mr. Epstein appeared to me to be devastated and extremely contrite. He was adamant that he had no idea that anyone involved was underage, and personally assured me that he would never again let himself be in that position. I believed him, and I made the mistake of believing that Mr. Epstein would not again commit a crime. I deeply regret doing so. Most importantly, I feel horrible for the women whom Mr. Epstein abused. While my professional association with Jeffrey Epstein has subjected my family to death threats and malicious personal attacks, I don't expect the members of the committee or of the public to feel sympathy for me. But I am left trying to explain what many people who knew Jeffrey Epstein have noted after his death. He led two entirely separate lives, his professional one and the other, a private, personal one that caused many others to suffer. That I did not know what my client did in his private life may be difficult for some to believe, but it's true. Thank you.
Starting with the majority, may all individuals, members, and staff who have since joined us since the beginning please announce themselves for the record.
James Comer, Chairman from Kentucky.
Andy Biggs, Congressman, Arizona 5.
William Timmons, South Carolina 4th Congressional District.
Dave Mann, California 47. James Washington, Virginia 11.
Thank you. The time reads 10:22, and the majority's time will begin now. Mr. Indyke, let's begin by discussing your education and experience. Where did you attend undergraduate school?
Colgate University,
And what degree did you graduate with?
a degree in education and economics,
What year did you graduate?
1986,
And where did you attend law school?
Cornell Law School,
And when did you graduate law school?
1991,
When were you admitted to practice law?
1992,
In what states were you admitted?
New York, initially.
And where have you since been admitted?
In 2019, I was admitted to practice law in the state of Florida.
Is your license currently in good standing?
I believe my licenses in both New York and Florida are in good stand.
Can you briefly go through your professional career up until now?
Sure. When I graduated Cornell Law School, I worked as first a clerk and then as an associate for the law firm of Golden Wachtel. I did that until I think it was 1994. In 1995, I joined the law firm of Greenberg Traurig in New York City. I worked there until sometime in 1996, towards the beginning of 1996, at which point I was asked by someone who was a former partner at Golden Wachtel to go work for him and with him to represent Jeffrey Epstein and his company. And since then, I have been working to represent primarily Jeffrey Epstein, both as an employee and then subsequently as a in my capacity as a law firm, my own law firm.
Prior to your employment with Mr. Epstein, what areas of law did you practice?
Corporate securities and trademark law.
When did you first meet Jeffrey Epstein?
Sometime in 1996, towards the beginning of 1996.
And Mr. Indyke, I understand that you're hard of hearing, so we're going to try to speak up. But if you could also speak up as well for everyone in the room.
Sure.
So let's begin again. When did you first meet Jeffrey Epstein?
It was, I believe, towards the beginning of 1996,
Where did you meet him?
at his office in New York City.
And why did you meet him at that time?
Prior to my meeting Mr. Epstein, the partner that I worked for at Golden Wachtell had asked me to come work with him to represent Mr. Epstein. And as part of me doing that, he wanted me to meet Mr. Epstein in his office. So I did so.
And for the record, I missed this. Who else was present during this meeting?
I don't recall, it was many years ago. That partner may have been there. So it would have been him and Mr. Epstein, I think. I don't recall anybody else.
And what did you discuss with Mr. Epstein at this time?
I can't recall specifically, but basically he asked me questions about my background, my corporate and securities background, about the work I did at Golden Wachtell and the work I did at Greenberg Traurig. Told me I'd be doing similar work for him.
Prior to meeting Mr. Epstein, what did you know about him?
Very little. When I worked at Golden Wachtell, I understood that he was a client of Golden Wachtell. And I understood that the partner that I worked for at Golden Wachtell had done some work with him along with one of the named partners, Bob Gold. But that's the extent of what I knew about it.
And what you testified to was all related to his business. Did he have any reputation outside of his business as it related to young women or girls at this time?
Not that I knew of.
What were your first impressions of Mr. Epstein?
I was slightly intimidated because he was explained to me to be a very wealthy man. I was not very wealthy, and I was very young at the time, and he was explained to me to be a very successful businessman. My impressions for him was that he was no nonsense. He seemed pleasant enough. Nothing more than that.
What did you understand his job to be at this time?
I understood that I would be providing support and assistance to the partner that brought me in connection with representing Mr. Epstein's business interests.
And you mentioned that
I think, Jack, did you ask what did you understand his job to be or your job to be?
Mr. Epstein's job.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Forgive me. Mr. Epstein's job, my understanding was that he was a financial consultant for wealthy individuals.
Did you know who his clients were at this time?
No.
Just to be clear, you mean before he took the job?
Correct. We've had a member join.
For purposes of the record, Jasmine Crockett, Texas 30.
Mr. Indyke, recognizing that we'll discuss more specifics later, can you briefly describe the nature and extent of your relationship with Mr. Epstein?
I was one of Mr. Epstein's many attorneys. My role was primarily a role as a corporate and transactional attorney. My role was to review documents, summarize documents, analyze documents, critique documents, draft documents, in a wide variety of areas. Investment documents, private placement memorandums, subscription agreements, option agreements, warrant agreements. Let's see what else. Registration rights agreements, stock purchase agreements, rights of first refusal agreements, all of those in the kind of side letters for investments, all of those in the investment field. There were times when he would do some trading, and my role was to review the trading confirmations. And to the extent there were documents required as a precursor to the trading, like interest swap agreements, things like that, I would review the interest swap agreements. To the extent that I had any comments on those, I would give my comments on those agreements. If Epstein was going to buy or sell a business, there were times when I would be required to draft basic business agreements or letters of intent, or if he was, or review a purchase agreement or a sale agreement, and critique it and summarize it and provide any evaluation of it. Epstein had aircraft, and his client had aircraft. I was involved as an attorney in connection with the acquisition and sale of aircraft, fixed wing aircraft, helicopters, rotorcraft, both new builds from manufacturers like Sikorsky, and sometimes when they were resales of the aircraft. Also, there was lots of real estate that was being acquired and sold during this time. So I would work with local counsel. If it wasn't in New York, for example, I would work, and sometimes even if it was, I would work with local real estate counsel in the acquisition or sale of real estate, anything from large acreage ranches to islands to townhouses to apartments to homes, any number of parcels of real estate. And in connection with some of the real estate that was acquired, there was a lot of construction going on during the course of my representation. And that construction would require architects and design. So I would review AIA architectural and design agreements, again, summarize, critique, evaluate. I would review proposals, just make sure that the proposals for any particular building or design were incorporated all of what I understood to be the kind of the roles or the program for the building that was to be done. There was construction management agreements that had to be reviewed, general contractor agreements that had to be reviewed. Sometimes liens would come up. So all of that, those things would have to be reviewed. From time to time, when a new asset like an aircraft or a helicopter or even a large boat would be acquired, a new entity would be formed for that asset, because that asset was a large, tended to be as an aircraft. Aircrafts could fall out of the sky. They could cause serious damage. So kind of it's corporate law 101 to make sure that when you have a kind of a liability type asset, you put that asset in a separate entity. So other assets held by the person can't be subject to the liability that is created by that asset. The same holds true for, it's kind of normal operating procedure, particularly for people in high net worth situations, when you would take on a new investment, or there would be an investment program, you would form a separate entity for that investment program. For new businesses, because you didn't want to mix a new business with an old business, you would form an entity for that new business. So part of what I did is, either if it was some place that in a jurisdiction where I was admitted and I knew of a corporate service company to do it, I would have a corporate service company form the entity. If not, I would have a local attorney do the same. So we did those things. Just kind of the types of things sometimes are very, very complex. There was just to give you an example, there was a project that required connecting one of Epstein's islands, because he had two, that island to the St. Thomas mainland, and that required the manufacture of a 15 kV cable with fiber optic capabilities by this Italian manufacturer. So I would have to work on that agreement with the manufacturer, and then we'd have to do, I'd have to work on a separate agreement for the installation of that cable across the span from St. Thomas mainland to the island. And then you'd have to work on the local, to step down the cable, all the work that the electrical contractors had to do to connect the cable to the island. And then there was also permitting that I had to work with local council who handled the permitting, and local environmental consultants to do the permitting to lay the cable on the ocean bed. So lots of different things like that. There was,
I think that's,
yes.
I just have a couple questions related to the number of attorneys. You mentioned there were a number of attorneys working in-house essentially for Mr. Epstein. Is that correct?
No, it was a number of attorneys that Mr. Epstein engaged.
Okay, so how many were actually working in-house?
At which time, sir?
Give me an example. Early on,
Early on, 3 attorneys,
and then as time went on,
2 attorneys. And then ultimately, nobody was working in-house. Ultimately, he was using outside counsel, including me as outside counsel, and other attorneys as outside counsel.
when you had the 3 attorneys, are you one of those 3?
I was one of the 3
When you
attorneys.
got down to 2, obviously you were one of
I
them.
was still, yes, one of the attorneys there.
Okay, and then you continued on until,
I continued on with the other attorney. I was there, but the other attorney formed an entity to serve Epstein and other clients, and I worked for that entity, and I was a junior member of that entity. And then ultimately, I formed my own law firm.
did you have any associates in that law firm or partners?
No,
You were sole proprietor?
I was.
Thank you.
Sure.
We've had more members and staff join. Can they please announce themselves for the record?
Sure. Robert Garcia, I'm the ranking member for Oversight Democrats. Road Conduct, California 17.
Yasmin Ansari, Arizona Spurs.
I want to stick with asking general questions to start. So during the course of your representing Mr. Epstein, how often did you communicate with him?
Towards the beginning, infrequently. I mean, I saw him from time to time. I spoke to him from time to time, but mostly his communications were with the partner that I worked with. And then the partner that I worked with would speak to me about assignments that I had specifically. Over time, I would have some interactions with him. I would get direct assignments from Mr. Epstein.
And you mentioned the partner, that's the same partner you referenced before.
Yeah, it's the partner who kind of asked me to come and join him representing Mr. Epstein.
For the record, what was his name?
His name was Jeffrey Shantz.
And how would you typically communicate with Epstein?
At which time?
During the course of your relationship?
Okay, so kind of multifaceted. Sometimes I would get messages. Sometimes I would get a communication through the partner. Sometimes he would be in the office and I would meet with him for 2 minutes, not a lot of FaceTime, and get a specific assignment. And then sometimes I would get a message from his assistant saying something that Epstein wanted from me. And towards the later end, I would meet with him when he no longer had an office in New York. Towards the later end, I would meet with him. I would meet with him on the ground floor in the dining room of his residence.
How often would you meet with him at the residence?
It really depends when. So towards the beginning, not at all. As time went on, once a month, sometimes twice a month. If he was in town and there was a transaction going on, could have been more, but typically it was about twice a month.
How long would your meetings last when you would visit his residence?
Typically an hour or so, maybe two, most.
Who typically would be present?
There was no kind of typical thing about who would be present. It really depended on the transaction and the specific matter that was, or matters that I was meeting with him about.
And I can hear you just fine, but there's a lot of people in the room that are struggling to hear you. So
I'm sorry.
However, however much you can speak up,
Okay.
would be very helpful.
Yes.
But I just want to focus on who was present. There are women that have been identified and deemed as assistants of Mr. Epstein. Do you recall them being present at these meetings?
I recall women coming into the meeting, delivering a message to him, sometimes bringing some food to him, but generally his personal assistants were not in the meetings.
And you mentioned that early on you'd have meetings at your office, and then it seemed that it became more common that you'd meet at the residence. When did this shift occur?
I think it was 1998 when Mr. Epstein moved his residence, his primary residence, to the U.S. Virgin Islands and his business to the U.S. Virgin Islands. So he no longer maintained an office in New York. And so when he came to New York, the requirement was to meet at his residence.
And I'm going to ask you a general question here. What were the nature of your communications with Mr. Epstein?
Can you rephrase the question?
What were the nature of your communications with Mr. Epstein?
I'm trying to understand. That's very general, and I don't really know.
Were the nature of your communications always related to the furnishing of legal services?
Yes.
So, for the record, did you ever have any communications with Mr. Epstein related to young women or girls?
No, absolutely not.
How would you characterize your relationship with Mr. Epstein?
It was strictly a business relationship, strictly a legal relationship.
For the record, at any point, did you consider Mr. Epstein to be a friend?
No.
Did you ever spend time with Mr. Epstein apart from your duties as his attorney?
I never socialized with Mr. Epstein. I never spent any time with Mr. Epstein other than when I was there for a status report or a legal project for Mr. Epstein.
Did you ever consider Epstein to be a mentor?
I did initially, and I could tell you a little story about that. When I first started working for Epstein, I got this assignment, and I can't remember the transaction that I was working on, but I got this agreement, and he told me I needed to get it reviewed and critiqued, and I mark it up, it's the word that they use, mark it up and give me your comments to it. I think I had 24 hours to do it. So I went back to my office, spent a very long time in my office, probably till like 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock that night, marking the thing up. And when I gave it to him, it was full of red. It's completely red. And I thought I'd done a fabulous job in marking up an agreement and showing all the ways the agreement was defective. When he looked at it, he kind of looked at it and said, well, what am I supposed to do with this? So I have a transaction that I have to get done within the next week. This is never going to, first of all, I don't know what's real, what's not real here, what's important, what's not important here. I can never get a transaction done if this is what I have to do. So now take this back and go find me the 10 most important things and rank them in order of importance to me. And I learned a huge lesson from that. And he taught me about being a practical lawyer, not just, a lawyer that's finding every possible theoretical kind of loophole in an agreement. So in that respect, I thought he was very helpful. And so that's, and he had other kind of advice to me like that. Those types of things in being a lawyer to, don't guess at things that I don't know, tell them what I don't know, tell them what I do know. And if I don't know, tell them I don't know. Those are the types of things that he taught me to do as a lawyer, which were helpful to other people that I was working with as a lawyer.
Mr. Indyke, that's helpful advice. You don't be just technically proficient to help facilitate the deal. But when you were working with him, you never sat down and had a drink. You never sat down and smoked a cigar with him.
No,
Never.
Two things. He doesn't drink, doesn't smoke, but that wasn't our relationship.
You didn't ever say, come along to having a cocktail party after work, come on, nothing like that.
I was never invited to a single dinner party that he had a few.
Okay, thank you.
Did you ever ask Mr. Epstein for personal favors?
Let's see how to answer that question. I asked him for help when I was, I think it was my first year or so. Sorry, my first year or so when I worked for him. I don't remember the exact time period. My wife and I were having fertility issues. Infertility treatments were quite expensive and they weren't covered by insurance. So I had asked him if it was possible for me to forego the insurance, and in lieu of the amount of money that he was paying for insurance at the time, if I could take that money and apply it towards the cost of infertility treatments. And at that time, his response to me was, absolutely not. You should keep your medical insurance and I will pay for your infertility treatment. Subsequent to that, it didn't work. And it didn't work, I think, 4 other times. Subsequent to that, without me having to ask, he would tell me, when are we doing the next one? And so Epstein paid for all of our infertility treatments until we were able to conceive.
This time I'd like to introduce what will be marked as Majority Exhibit 3. And this is a letter sent in 2008 by Mr. Epstein's criminal defense lawyers to prosecutors in Florida when Epstein was under investigations for crimes committed against minors. This is a compilation of statements from various employees of Mr. Epstein, all attesting to his good character. This document is base number EFTA 2857458. And I would like to direct your attention to page 13. We're specifically looking at the bottom, and page 14, and I will give you a moment to review. So which page? Page 13.
Thank you.
Okay.
And for the record, we're reviewing the italicized portion. Did you write this, Mr. Indyke?
I believe I did.
And why did you contribute a statement for this,
Um,
the filing?
I'm trying to, let's see what this was for. I believe I was asked by defense counsel to contribute a statement for him.
So there's a part where you mentioned that Mr. Epstein had provided emotional and financial support. Is that in reference to what you previously described as help for infertility issues?
Yes.
And for the record, again, why did Jeffrey Epstein offer to pay for these services?
I can't tell you what was in his own mind, but I can tell you my perception was that he was being generous to me. He didn't really know me very long, and there was no kind of obvious benefit to him at that stage in my career with him. So I guess he was being generous. I will say this, that, you know, in the years that followed, he did this kind of thing for other employees, friends, acquaintances. He appeared to be generous. He appeared to understand that his money could do good things, and he appeared to use his money to do things like that for people.
Did he provide you any other support besides the infertility support?
Can you be more specific in terms of a time frame?
Well, we're looking at this character reference around this time, 2008.
No, but you know, that was a big deal, obviously. It was a very difficult time for my wife and I, and it was very meaningful to me to have that support.
We've had another member of Congress join. Can she please identify herself for the record?
I'm Congresswoman Melanie Stansbury from New Mexico.
Mr. Indyke,
Yes.
it's a poignant letter that you wrote here. Did you see in the whole packet that was submitted as the defense for Mr. Epstein before it was submitted?
I don't recall.
Were you aware what the charges were pending at the time that you wrote your statement?
I'm trying to remember when this statement was written. It was kind of fluid at that time.
Well, you knew that there was some kind of criminal allegation against him, which is why there was a criminal defense attorney that was asking you to write the letter, right?
Yes, there were criminal allegations against
You know
him.
what the allegations were.
Again, it depends at what time we're talking about. My understanding,
Again, can you please speak up for the mics, I guess?
I'm sorry,
I'm sorry, Mr. Indyke.
no, my apologies. I'm sorry, I'm not speaking loud enough. My understanding, basically, that the allegations against him at the time, I think at the time that this was going on, and, you know, forgive me, it was a while ago, but I think the allegations at that time, this is the state investigation in Palm Beach, were that there were massages at his house. Some of those massages wound up sexual in nature, and that at times it wound up being the case that there were some underage women there in the massages.
So you understood that those were the allegations or the nub of the charges at the time you wrote your letter.
I did understand that those were the allegations, but if I could talk a little bit more about that, I'd like to, if that's okay.
I'm sure they're going to get into that. I just want to ask one other question. You wrote the letter, criminal defense attorney asked you to write the letter. Did you ever discuss the charges with Mr. Epstein before you wrote your statement?
No.
You never talked to him once about these allegations before, even though you just described somewhat of what you knew about him, you did not discuss that with him at all before you wrote a good character reference for him.
To the extent that there were discussions with Epstein, they were always in the presence of defense counsel. There were many lawyers there, and I was a member of that group. So I never had a personal conversation with him like that, like the one that you're suggesting.
And during those conversations, I assume that Mr. Epstein wasn't mute. He was speaking perhaps about the charges.
Well, a couple of things. I want to talk to you about them, but I will say this. I have a balance of privilege here, but I also don't want it to be that I'm trying to withhold anything from you. So at the time that this was going on, what I was learning from the defense people who were investigating it was that the investigation was full of allegations that were in many ways untrue, contradicted by recorded, transcribed statements from the witnesses. What I understood from the attorneys was that the police investigation was flawed and somehow either biased, or there was the facts of that investigation as described in the police report were inconsistent with recorded statements from the witnesses, omitted information that the witnesses gave them in recorded statements. There was even, if I recall, there was even in the police report reference to a trash pull where the police report indicated that they found a sex toy in the trash pull. And it later turned out that what was identified as a sex toy was in fact a broken salad utensil. And so, but when the police used the information from their report in their affidavits and their arrest warrants, they kept the part about it being finding sex toys in the garbage pull, but never mentioned the fact that it was later found to be a salad utensil. There's also no mention in that police report about the fact that Epstein had been adamant that he didn't know that anybody was underage. In fact, there was, as I understood it, because I didn't do it, but as I understood it, there was a lie detector test, a polygraph test, where which indicated that Epstein was being truthful when he said he didn't know about the age.
So Mr. Indyke,
So
let's go back to an earlier question that I asked you about when in context of that charge, when in context to his adjudication of guilt and his sentencing, I assume, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that you wrote this in connection with the sentencing or the pre-sentencing report on behalf of the defense. Is that accurate?
I don't know for a fact, but that's not what I recollect.
Okay.
I think this was done previously.
So what I find intriguing about what you just testified to, you went some rather lengthy detail about the theory of the defense of Mr. Epstein. But you're having trouble contextualizing when you wrote this particular document. I find that intriguing and a little bit difficult for me to understand why.
May I just say that he didn't write the document, he wrote that excerpt,
Yes.
just to be clear for the record.
No, that's correct.
Okay.
Well, over the course of, the reason I can provide as much detail about the defense position is because that detail has been argued over and over and over again by the defense counsel. So it's something that has stuck in my mind. When this was written, it was written once. It was also a very long time ago. And so I can't tell you precisely when it was written. And I can't tell you, I just can't tell you the full context when this was submitted.
In your opening, you said that after 2008, after his guilty plea, you thought that he was contrite and that he learned from his mistake. And you said that you were horrified to learn of the crimes he committed after. what crimes are you referencing after 2008?
So now with hindsight,
Was he ever charged, or I'm unaware of any charge or referencing times post 2008? Is there,
So-
what charges are you referencing? What
Uh,
crimes are you referencing?
I'm not referencing any charges after 2008. After he was,
What conduct after 2008 was criminal? Because you said that you were horrified to learn of his criminal activity after this. In your opening.
I'm not sure that I
You did.
don't think I said I was horrified to learn of his criminal acts. I was horrified that he hurt people. But all of that is in the context of statements that have emerged since his death.
What criminal activity occurred?
Since his,
I'm unaware what criminal activity occurred post 2008.
I don't specifically know what criminal activity occurred post 2008. I wasn't there. I didn't see any criminal activity, but what I've seen now are allegations by a number of women that have come to light after he died, where they said all of these things happened. And while I've never seen him do anything that way, nobody's ever reported anything to me that way. Clearly, with all of these women saying this happened after the fact, I cannot say that he didn't do a lot of bad things. And so learning this after his death, I feel horribly. And that's what I said. I do feel horrible.
So, Mr. Indyke, just go back to the statement you wrote that was inserted in the defense, the criminal defense statement. I just wondering if was it your normal practice to write such a letter of recommendation on behalf of someone without full understanding of the ramifications of what you were saying and the allegations and the context with which you were being asked to write that? I mean, did you know why you were being asked to write that specific statement?
I knew that people were saying, were making allegations against him, which were contrary to what I had observed in him. And the truth is that I felt they asked me for what he had done that was generous to me. And I felt like I could be honest about that. And so that's why I did it.
So I'm aware that you were a transactional attorney, probably didn't know ramifications, but you understood, I would guess, as an attorney, somewhere along the pike, had to understand something about criminal law, that your statement was going to be used to facilitate a reduction in sentence, reduction in charges, or some benefit to Mr. Epstein in light of the rather substantial charges which you described in some detail that you were aware of.
At the time that first of all, this is the first time anything like that ever happened to me. So to some extent, it's all very new to me. I am still representing the person. The person that I represented never exhibited this kind of conduct to me, was very generous to me. And at the time,
Even though he
May I
was
finish,
generous
sir?
to you,
May I finish?
even though he was generous to you, you understood this was going to be used to facilitate either a reduction in sentence or reduction in charges.
But I also understood, the answer is, I understood that it was I didn't know it was going to be used for a reduction of charges or reduction of sentence. I understood it was going to be used to give to law enforcement as a character reference for him. Okay, I did understand that.
And so why would you give a character reference if not for a reduction of sentence or reduction in charges? I mean, that's why you would give something like that to a police agency, is it not?
That's not what was going on. That's not what I was thinking at the time.
All right.
It wasn't.
Mr. Indyke, you had
Yeah.
referenced attorney-client privilege. I just, for the record, if you wish to assert any privilege, you must say so on the record.
So far, there hasn't been a very specific question. If that does arrive, I'll let you know.
And we're going to jump around a little bit here, but you had mentioned that the allegations that were made against Mr. Epstein during that 2006, 2008 period, you had mentioned they were untrue. Who Did you make that determination yourself?
No, that was communicated to me.
Who communicated that to you?
And through, it was communicated through defense counsel. And the reason I can discuss it is this, it's the same statements that defense counsel made in documents they delivered to the government.
And for the record, who was the defense counsel?
Epstein had a lot of defense attorneys at the time. Off the top of my head, Gerald Lefcourt was one. I believe Jack Goldberger was one. I believe Mike Teen was one. Dershowitz, Alan Dershowitz, I think I mentioned. Lily Sanchez. I'm trying to remember who was involved at that particular time. Cheryl Reich, I believe, was an attorney, a criminal defense attorney of his at the time. Guy Lewis also. Martin Weinberg, the attorneys came on at different times, so I can't tell you exactly who came on when.
In addition to defense counsel, did Mr. Epstein hire private investigators?
I don't know that Mr. Epstein hired private investigators. I believe the defense counsel hired private investigators.
Why were private
Oh,
investigators?
I'm sorry, Roy Black. I want to add to that, Roy Black was part of this as well.
Why were defense or private investigators hired?
Not being a criminal defense attorney, and not participating at the time that they did this, because I came in after. I didn't hear anything about the allegations until about 2006 or so. Much of the attorney's work had already been done by that time, including, I think, the hiring of private investigators. So the actual reasons as to why, I don't know, but I think my assumption at the time was that's kind of what you do as a criminal defense attorney, is you bring on a private investigator to find out information so that you can have a full idea of what you're defending.
For the record, did you ever work with these private investigators?
At some point, I did communicate with private investigators, I think, for payment. But and I'm sure I must have had conversations at some point in the process, not early on, but I just don't remember.
But you yourself, as far as the work that the private investigators were conducting, you didn't direct them?
For the criminal work that you're talking about, absolutely not.
And earlier you mentioned that you never socialized with Mr. Epstein. Did Mr. Epstein ever invite you to social events?
I was invited one time, and it was the only time, to not a social event with him, frankly, but there was a Victoria's Secret fashion show. I was invited one time, and that was the only time. I think I saw him there once, but I certainly didn't socialize with him there. And it wasn't just me, it was me, Jeff Shans, who I worked with. So the attorneys were invited. But other than that, no. I never was invited to a dinner. I never was invited to a show. I never invited to a movie or anything with him. No.
And I want to return back to the statement that you provided for Epstein's defense. Is it true that you made Mr. Epstein a godfather of your children?
Yes, it was an honorary appellation. I had no expectation because I didn't have that kind of relationship with him. But I wanted to show gratitude, do something to show gratitude for how he helped my wife and I have our children. And so I had asked him, would it be okay? And he wouldn't have any obligation to do anything. But, it's a way of honoring him if I could make him honorary godfather. And I did.
Sorry. Based on your testimony, your children did not have any relationship with Mr. Epstein?
No. I think in total, they met him twice in the office, and they were very, very young at the time. My wife was there, they were in the office, I think it was 2 times.
Would you have entrusted Mr. Epstein to care for your children?
To care for my children? No, I wouldn't have trusted anybody to care for my children.
Who is Ghislaine Maxwell?
Ghislaine Maxwell was an associate of Jeffrey Epstein.
When did you first meet Ghislaine Maxwell?
Sometime after I started working representing Epstein in 1996.
What did you understand her relationship to be with Mr. Epstein?
My understanding in it, at the time, my understanding was that she was largely kind of an overall household manager. Epstein even then would travel from different households, and Ghislaine was responsible for making sure that the households were managed properly, that they were supplied properly, that the employees there were doing the cleaning and things like that. That was my understanding of her role. I learned at some point that she had been a girlfriend of his, though I do not believe at the time that I was there that she was a girlfriend of his.
And you mentioned that she would manage Mr. Epstein's properties. Did you ever understand her to have any role in arranging or scheduling masseuses for Mr. Epstein?
No.
She never talked to you about paying masseuses?
No.
How often did you interact with Ghislaine Maxwell?
When I worked in the office in New York City on Madison Avenue, she had an office there, so she appeared from time to time. She wasn't in my section of the office, but she was there, so I would see her. I would say hello, that kind of thing. And it wasn't super frequent, but I saw her. I saw her there.
As far as your day-to-day and the legal services you were providing, did you have any interactions with her?
At times I did. Again, most of my stuff was very specific, it was transactional. So there were times I believe Maxwell purchased a townhouse. So I did work for that townhouse, the purchase of that townhouse. I believe she had me look at an agreement or two. I can't recall which agreements off the top of my head, but I believe she had me look at agreements or two. And sometimes she would convey requests by Epstein for me to do some kind of a transactional or corporate work for that.
And you mentioned the acquisition of the property. This past week, we had Mr. Khan testify, and he said that there were accounting work that he did for Ms. Maxwell, and she, I don't want to mischaracterize his testimony, but said effectively that she didn't pay. Did she pay you for the work that you did for her?
No, it was done, to the extent I did work for her, it was at the authorization of Epstein.
Would you consider Ghislaine Maxwell at any point to be a friend of yours?
No.
Do you believe that Maxwell facilitated Epstein's access to minor victims?
I don't know.
Mr. Indyke, I want the record to be clear, so I'm going to ask you some questions related to the investigation of Mr. Epstein in 2005. When did you first become aware that there was an investigation into Mr. Epstein's conduct in Southern Florida?
I'm not entirely certain. I believe it was 2006, 2007.
And for the record, you did not have any knowledge of the illegal activity by Mr. Epstein prior to his arrest.
I'd worked for him for a decade, and I had no knowledge of any allegations being made against him like that.
On October 20th of 2005, police executed a search warrant for Mr. Epstein's Palm Beach, Florida home. Do you recall this occurring?
Can you tell me the date again?
October 20th, 2005.
I I don't think I knew contemporaneously.
Palm Beach detective Joseph Riccieri spoke out about his belief that Epstein was tipped off about the raid since multiple computers expected to be at his house were missing when the search warrant was executed. To your knowledge, did anyone tip off Jeffrey Epstein to the October 20th search warrant in Palm Beach?
I don't know.
When you visited Mr. Epstein's properties, did you notice cameras?
Can we specify which property?
Well, you mentioned the Manhattan property at one point.
Sure. So let's break it down. The Manhattan property. My understanding about the cameras, there were cameras in the Manhattan property. My understanding is that they were external cameras. There was a security room when you first walked in to the right that had monitors of the external cameras that were all around the perimeter, the outside of his townhouse. I later found out, and by later I mean, I think, after things start to get conflated, but I think I found this out after he got arrested the second time, that there was one camera, and this is probably even after he died, that was one camera. He had a safe room in the house. I didn't even know there was a safe room in the house, but he had a safe room in the house. And there was a camera outside the safe room in the house. Those are the cameras that I knew about in New York. In Florida, there was much made about, and I think it was in the press. Again, a lot has gone on, and lots of reports have come out since then. But I believe in Florida there was a reference to cameras in his house, but there were cameras, as I understand it, that the police helped put in there because there was concern that somebody was stealing from him. So they put the cameras, I think, in his desk on the ground floor, and I wasn't sure if there was maybe one in the garage as well. But those are the cameras that I knew about.
There have been allegations that Mr. Epstein would record visits at various properties. You don't know anything about that?
I've heard the allegations. I know of no recordings. I don't know of cameras that would have done that.
Mr. Indyke, excuse me.
Yes.
The majority has about 5 minutes, and I just want to make sure the record is clear, and I'm going to ask you numerous yes or no questions. First, this is not a yes or no question. How did Mr. Epstein act towards the young women or girls that he surrounded himself with?
The question assumes that I saw him surround himself with young women or girls. It's not true.
Did you ever witness Mr. Epstein engage in sexual conduct?
I never witnessed Mr. Epstein engage in sexual conduct.
Did you ever witness Mr. Epstein have sexual conduct of any kind with young women or girls?
I never witnessed Mr. Epstein have any sexual conduct, period.
Did you ever witness Mr. Epstein sexually abuse or assault young women or girls?
I never witnessed that, no.
Did Mr. Epstein ever discuss sexual acts of any kind with you?
No.
Was it common for Mr. Epstein or Miss Maxwell to bring young women or girls to any other place where the two of you would meet?
The only women that were ever in my presence, to my recollection, with one exception, I'll get to that in a second, were women who were either in their 20s or in their 30s, who were assistants, who I understood to be personal assistants of Epstein.
You said you had an exception.
I'm sorry, and the exception is he had a goddaughter, and I don't know that I feel comfortable giving her name, but he had a goddaughter that I believe he had seen from time to time, and I had met from time to time. A couple of times, I think, because she would, when I was in his when I was in his home, in his dining room. She had come into the dining room.
Can I just be clear? So the exception was that's the only person who you saw as a minor female in his presence?
Correct.
Okay, just to be clear.
Who are the assistants that you're referencing?
Um, Svetlana Pozadaeva. There was a woman by the name of there was another woman by the name of, trying to remember. If you have some names, I could tell you if I recall them or not.
And we'll have more specific questions.
Okay.
Did Mr. Epstein have children of his own?
To my knowledge, no.
Did Epstein or Maxwell ever ask if you wanted them to bring women or girls to you?
Never.
Did you ever have any sexual contact with young women or girls in the presence of Epstein or Maxwell?
Absolutely not.
Did you ever have sexual contact with any young woman or girl introduced to you by Epstein or Maxwell?
Absolutely not.
Did you ever witness Mr. Epstein receive a massage from a young woman or girl?
No.
Did you ever receive any massages from any young woman or girl brought to you by or introduced to you by Mr. Epstein or Miss Maxwell?
No.
We'll go off the record.
You can go on the record. Mr. Indyke, good morning.
Good morning.
I understand that Ms. Crockett has a statement.
Just briefly, as you go through your line of questioning,
Yes.
when you reference someone, if you say the assistant, if you say the partner, can you also make sure that you reference their name after you label their title for clarity of the record?
I'll try to remember that, yes.
Thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Indyke, I'm going to revisit some of the areas that you discussed with my majority colleagues in the previous round. In doing that, I don't want to make you repeat yourself. I just want to make sure that we have as clear a record as possible.
Okay.
So going back to the time when Mr. Epstein first hired you, did you have a title?
Attorney?
And if I understood your testimony correctly, you were the sole proprietor of an entity called Darren Indyke PLLC. Is that right?
Darren K. Indyke.
Darren K.
LLC. And I don't think did I give that name? But that is.
Thank you. And if I also understand correctly, Jeffrey Epstein was the sole client of Darren K. Indyke PLLC. Is that right?
He was the primary client. From time to time, he was the primary client, and from time to time, I would do things for him and for his clients. But he was the primary client, and there were times when friends or acquaintances or somebody else would come. I wouldn't take on jobs very often because the expectation was that I would be available at all times, and that I would get projects for Epstein, and sometimes it's for Epstein's clients. I would get a project, and the expectation was as soon as that project came to me, that would be the most important thing I did, and I would get it done very quickly. So it wasn't, part of what I had to do was be available to make sure that I could respond to those things on that basis. And if I brought on more clients, that would interfere with that.
Are you familiar with an entity called J. Epstein and Co.?
Yes, I am familiar with that entity. I believe it's called J. Epstein and Company.
And were you associated with it in any way?
Long time ago, but I believe that's the entity that initially employed me.
And over what period of time did J. Epstein and Company employ you?
I don't remember the exact end date, but it was from 1996 for 3 or so years.
And was there another entity that employed you following J. Epstein and Company?
There was another entity called New York Strategy Group, which was primarily owned by Shantz,
I'm sorry.
by Jeffrey Shantz, the partner that brought me into. I believe I had a minority ownership of that LLC. It was an LLC.
And over what period of time were you employed through New York Strategy Group?
I believe that New York Strategy Group was my employer until, I want to say, 2006 or 7. And at some point, I became the primary owner of New York Strategy Group.
And when did Darren Indyke Darren K. Indyke PLLC come into existence?
That came into existence, I believe, in 2008. Again, it was some time ago, but I believe it was in 2008.
So does J. Epstein and Company still exist?
No.
When was it wound down?
I believe J. Epstein and Company was wound down when Epstein moved his primary residence to the U.S. Virgin Islands and formed a company there. I don't remember the date exactly, but I think the company's name is Financial Trust Company, Inc. And J. Epstein and Company was discontinued at that point, I believe.
Did you have any association with Financial Trust Company, Inc.?
I believe I was at some point a corporate secretary, may have been a vice president in an administrative sense.
You were asked earlier about your communications with Jeffrey Epstein. Are you aware of Jeffrey Epstein ever using encrypted messaging software or an encrypted messaging app such as Signal?
As part of the things that I did for Epstein, once he became a registered sex offender, I had to report or include in a report to the New York Sex Offender Registry apps that he had used or that he had a presence on. I want to say that at some point, I remember Signal being used and maybe WhatsApp, though I can't tell you when.
At the time you started working for Jeffrey Epstein, what was his net worth to your knowledge? An approximate number is fine.
I don't know.
Did you come to know that later in time?
Well, I know it when he died because I'm co-executor of the estate. I had to know it. There were times that I could recall over before I became executor, hearing net worths around, $500 million, sometimes less, sometimes 300 million. But, accounting for his assets and his wealth, that wasn't my role. So if I heard it in passing, not necessarily something that I would be kind of investigating or reporting.
And whose role was it to keep track of that?
The accounting department.
And specifically who?
I think Rich Kahn would do that. I think that was part of his role when he joined.
And over the period of time during which Mr. Epstein employed you, what, to your understanding, were the sources of his wealth?
Primarily, they were clients that he worked for and investments that he made. He did very well with investment funds. You know, I'm not a financial markets kind of person. That wasn't my kind of skill set, but my understanding was the reputation that he had was that he was skilled with understanding financial markets, currencies, options, securities trading, but that his business wasn't as an investment advisor. His business was more as a financial consultant. But he did have participations in funds, and those funds yielded him pretty solid results. So between the funds and the clientele that he had that paid him fees over time, that's where his wealth came from my understanding.
If we could focus on the client servicing piece, how many clients did he have during the time that you worked for him?
I'm trying to, I can name them. I never actually thought about how many, but Les Wexner, clearly. When I first joined, he'd given me some kind of an assignment to do for David Rockefeller. I don't know if Rockefeller was a paying client. I wouldn't, that's not something I wasn't, again, that wasn't my role, but I did work for David Rockefeller. I believe Elizabeth Johnson. And I know there was work done for Mort Zuckerman. Leon Black. I know the Rothschilds. Trying to remember which of them or what entity, but I don't.
Would that be Ariana Rothschild?
I know the name Ariana Rothschild, and it's possible that it was for Ariana, but I'm not 100% certain.
Glenn Dubin?
So Glenn Dubin, I don't think Glenn Dubin was a client, like a client in the same sense that Wexner was a client. Dubin, as I understand it, had, there were a couple of different ways that he was connected with Dubin. Dubin had funds that he invested in and that he made a good deal of money off these funds. I think Dubin, if I recall, he referred Jeffrey to invest in a fund called, I think it was DB's Learn. I don't remember the full name, but that's the fund name. And there was a dispute about DB's Learn that got fairly elevated. And as part of the resolution of that dispute, there was a settlement that came about. As part of the resolution of that dispute, because it was Dubin's referral to that fund, Dubin had some kind of compensation payment to Epstein to settle that case. And the last thing that I recall is Dubin had a company, I can't remember the name of the company right now as I'm sitting here, but that company was purchased by JP Morgan, I believe, and I believe Epstein got a finder's fee for that, and that was a one-off thing. It wasn't like Epstein was kind of representing Dubin all the time or things like that.
What about Steven Sinofsky?
I know the name. I don't know, and I believe that there was a payment from Sinofsky. I just don't know. I don't know the nature of that relationship.
And just going down the roster,
Mm-hmm.
to the best of your recollection, how much did each of these people pay Epstein for the services he provided to them? And I'll start with Les Wexner.
I really don't know how much Wexner paid him. It was a lot, but I just don't know how much.
And what was the nature of the work that Epstein did for Les Wexner?
A variety of things. As I understood it, and his relationship with Wexner predates my arrival there. But as I understood it, sometimes people who obtain kind of this ultra high net worth standing get there gradually over time, and they kind of build their offices gradually over time. And when they do that, it becomes inefficient. There are people who are not necessarily doing things and getting paid to do things, and there are people doubling up on things. And so part of the thing that Epstein did, at least for Wexner, that I can recall being told about, was kind of cleaning house a little bit. Also, he would do things for Wexner, like, for example, even, somebody at that level of wealth has lots and lots and lots of assets. And all of those things, art, jewelry, all of that stuff require insurance. But unless you're kind of born into it, you don't know how you're supposed to deal with that. And how you're supposed to deal with that is photograph it and appraise it so all of that's for record. God forbid something happens to it. You have good records to justify your insurance claim. So they helped organize it that way. Jeffrey did tax work, estate planning work.
Not to interrupt you, I'm receiving another request for you to speak up. I think
I'm sorry.
some of our
Sorry.
audience members are having difficulty
Apologize.
hearing you.
If I move this closer, would it help or not?
Let's try it.
Yeah, let's do that. Sorry, my voice is not.
I think it's for the people in the room, just a little.
Yeah, I don't know if
Right.
the mic's gonna.
So I apologize to everybody. Let's see, so Epstein also did estate planning work, did tax planning, help people kind of achieve kind of better tax results, more tax efficient results for themselves. I don't know that too much of the detail behind this, but it was my understanding that with respect to Wexner, Epstein helped him gain greater liquidity with the wealth that he did have, because things like that help.
But that's a helpful picture, and I appreciate that.
Okay, so
and
that's Wexner.
Moving down the list, and I think if we could just cabin the answers to the amount that each one of these people paid Epstein, to the extent you recall.
Sure.
The next name is Leon Black.
The way I know this is not because I kind of tracked it or reported on it, but it's based upon what I kind of read through the papers. So Leon Black, he did work for, I can confirm that. I heard reports that it was something like $158 million, and that wouldn't seem unreasonable to me.
And David Rockefeller,
I don't know.
Elizabeth Johnson.
I also don't know. She was a different lawyer by the name of Mandy Ellison was the lawyer that worked on her account.
And Mort Zuckerman.
I don't know how much money, if any, that he got from Mort.
And then the Rothschilds.
Also, I don't know.
Shifting back to the period in time when Epstein hired you.
Yes.
Were you aware that he had an affinity for young women
No.
or for teenage girls?
No, absolutely not.
Did you become aware of that over time?
The only way I became aware of the allegation that he had an affinity for teenage girls was once I was kind of learned about the investigation in Palm Beach.
Did you become aware at any point that Epstein sexually abused young women and teenage girls?
I became aware of the allegation in Palm Beach that there were massages which at times ended up sexual, and that in some cases there were underage people in those massages. My understanding at the time was that he was unaware of their age. That my understanding is that the statements given by the people who gave police statements were that there wasn't force used, there wasn't coercion used, those are the statements being made, I'm not testifying it to myself as to what I know, because I don't. But those are the statements, no force, no coercion. And that the conduct was voluntary. Which again, I'm not commenting underage.
Okay.
I'm not making any comment about underage.
Can I just ask if you were asking if he was ever personally aware, or he's talking about allegations, but was your
Yes, but
question?
yeah, we veered off a bit. So yeah, and
Right.
I was focused on the personal knowledge.
So just to be clear.
I'm sorry, I have no personal knowledge of that.
We'll come back to that. During your employment, Mr. Khan, with Jeffrey Epstein, did you ever?
Mr. Indyke.
I'm so sorry, Mr. Indyke.
That's okay.
I beg your pardon. During your employment, Mr. Indyke, with Jeffrey Epstein, did you ever discuss with him his sexual activity with young women, whether consensual or otherwise?
No,
Did you ever discuss that topic with anyone else?
the topic generally, I'm sure, came up during legal conversations.
You were speaking during the previous round about Mr. Epstein's arrest in Florida. When did you learn about his arrest?
Again, the timing is a little bit cloudy to me. I don't believe I knew about it until 2006.
How did you become aware of it?
I believe, trying to remember back, I believe Epstein told me.
And did that conversation happen in person?
It was an in-person conversation. I want to say it was an in-person conversation. And I want to say it was in New York. I just don't remember where in New York.
Okay. And how long after the arrest did that conversation take place?
I don't know.
What did Mr. Epstein tell you during that conversation?
That he was charged, that he didn't really go into the details of the charges. This is more substance of it because I don't remember the specific conversation. And then he told me that there were lawyers working on it with him and that I should work with them.
What was your reaction?
Surprise and shock, to be honest.
Did you ask him for any additional details about the arrest or the nature of the charges?
I think I was so surprised that I didn't think to, and also my relationship with him wasn't so that I could get so deeply personal. And I had never been involved with anything like that before, so I didn't really know what to do.
Was the rest of Mr. Epstein's staff informed of the arrest at some point?
Yes, at some point. I don't remember when.
When, to your knowledge, was Mr. Khan informed of the arrest?
I don't know.
Did you ever discuss it with him?
In passing, but nothing in detail.
What was the conversation in passing?
Just the arrest. I think maybe when he lost banking privileges, must have been about the arrest. Nothing. Rich Khan and I did not get into detail about Jeffrey Epstein's arrest.
What did you discuss with respect to the loss of banking privileges?
Again, substance, not detail, that the banking privileges at Chase were lost. That, and again, I don't know if other than that their banking privileges lost, I don't know that I have enough detail to give you more than that.
Was it your understanding that the privileges at Chase were lost as a result of Mr. Epstein's arrest?
It was an assumption more than an understanding, because I don't know if anybody's experienced this, but when banks deny services to you, they don't, as a general rule, tell you why. They just say no.
But your assumption was that it was linked to the arrest as opposed to a different cause.
Yes. There was lots of publicity at the time, I think, that this happened, and so.
And I also understand from your testimony during the previous round that you ultimately represented Mr. Epstein along with other counsel in connection with his arrest and prosecution in Florida.
I was never the direct defense counsel, but I was brought on as a group of people that were.
So it would be fair to say that you were a member of his defense team.
Yes, very loosely, but yes.
So I think that anticipates my next question. Was there an allocation of responsibility among the members of the team? Did certain lawyers have responsibilities that differed from others?
You can't talk about how he allocated responsibility among the lawyers. There wasn't a group meeting like, you do this, you do that, you do the other thing.
Based on your observation.
My observation was that there was a group of lawyers at the time, all of whom kind of shared information and did things together. My role was kind of specific task oriented. Sometimes I would, if Epstein would ask me, did so-and-so do this yet? Could you ask them to do this or ask them when they're going to do this? But I believe it was more like a group thing. Some people were better writers than others. Marty Weinberg was a very good writer. Jay Lefkowitz, also a very good writer. But I think as a rule, everybody kind of worked together.
And what, to your understanding, were the crimes that Jeffrey Epstein ultimately pled to?
My understanding was that there were two charges. One charge was a solicitation of prostitution, and the other charge was procuring prostitution of someone under the age of 18.
And please correct me if I'm wrong. I understand from your testimony earlier that you were aware of the requirement that Jeffrey Epstein register as a sex offender in various states as a result of his plea. Is that right?
Yes, I became aware of that fact, yes.
And that included New York State?
Yes, there was an initial registration in New York.
And you were involved in the registration, is that right?
Yes, I believe I was involved in the registration.
And did you become aware in connection with that Jeffrey Epstein was designated a level 3 sex offender in New York State?
The answer to your question, yes. But that was after a round of litigation.
The issue was litigated? The
issue was litigated, yes.
Okay. And were you part of the legal team that represented him in connection with that litigation?
Loosely.
And was it your understanding at the time that level 3 under New York State law meant that there had been a determination that Epstein posed a high risk of a repeat offense and a threat to public safety?
I understood it was a different designation, but I didn't understand that.
Broadly speaking, were you troubled by Mr. Epstein's guilty plea and incarceration in Florida?
Was I troubled? I was troubled. I guess the answer is yes. It was troubling. The problem I have in grasping and kind of tackling the question you have is not really knowing what it is. You know, it has come to, as it's come to pass. Clearly, he did something. But at the time, what I was struggling with is what it is that he actually did do. I think I went into previously I went into how the police reports were inconsistent with recorded statements, how there were references to items as sex toys, which were broken salad utensils, There was even a statement from, I never heard the statement directly, but I was made aware of a statement made by the lead prosecutor in Florida, who was a female experienced sex crimes prosecutor that uttered a statement to the effect that there were no real victims there. Now, I'm not saying there weren't. I'm just saying that that's what I heard at the time. So I'm struggling with these things and not knowing what allegations are true or what allegations aren't true. And I know that with respect to his sex offense, the sex offender charge, which was required not by the state, it was required by the U.S. Attorney's Office after the state had kind of convened a grand jury. The grand jury came back with something that, I don't remember the charge, but it wasn't that charge. And the consequence for that charge was mandatory PTI, which was much less than obviously the police chief wanted. And so what happened during the course of the federal investigation is the U.S. Attorney's Office wanted something more than that, and wanted him to plead to charges that would, one, put him in jail, and two, plead to charges that for which there would be a sex offender registration requirement. And the charge that they ultimately said you should go back to the state and make them charge you this was a charge that the defense team had been saying that they didn't have the factual predicate to actually have that charge, but that will do it because that's what you want to get this thing resolved. So the troubling part of it, it's hard for me to know for sure what actually happened, what was true, what was not true. A lot of the allegations turned out not to be true.
What about now? Do you have a belief as to whether girls and women were abused in Florida?
Well, again, after he after he was arrested the second time and then died, lots of people have come forward. Lots of them come forward who didn't come forward before, who said that they hadn't come forward. But since then, as the co-executive of the state, I've been made aware of many, many claims. And so with that number of claims being made, it's really hard to say that, no, he didn't do anything. Obviously, he did a lot of terrible things. So my view is, I don't know exactly what he did. And I'd say this again, because I want everybody to be clear about this. I didn't see it. I didn't see anything, and nobody complained to me about anything. So I don't know. But all these people came forward. So obviously there's something there. So your question is, what do I believe? No, I believe he did bad things.
At any point after you learned about Mr. Epstein's arrest in Florida, did you ever consider quitting your job?
With all of the discussion about how, the answer is, I don't think I did. I'm going back in time. I don't think I did. And the explanation for that is twofold. With all of the discussion about the defects in the investigation and statements from like the lead prosecutor and all this stuff and the lie detector test and all this and all of these other things, I think there was even a psychological evaluation that said he wasn't a pedophile. And so all of these conflicting reports came. It seemed to me, who was very inexperienced with this stuff, that maybe it wasn't what they were saying. And so
when taking into consideration all of that information, it sounds like you were weighing the question.
No, I'm weighing the question now. The question then was, I drank the Kool-Aid at the time. I think that's the answer, is I drank the Kool-Aid at the time.
So I think our members have some questions for you, Mr.
Okay.
Indyke.
Great. Mr. Indyke, I have a couple questions. Just to follow up, do you personally believe that girls and women were abused by Jeffrey Epstein in Palm Beach?
I do believe that Epstein engaged in bad conduct with women, yes.
Do you believe that girls and women were abused?
I believe so, yes.
Raped?
I don't know.
Okay. Let me get a couple questions. Mr. Indyke, I want to ask a few questions related to Jane Doe 4 from the case Doe versus Jeffrey Epstein. out of the Southern District of New York. Now, Jane Doe 4 alleged that she met Epstein in South Carolina in the 1980s, and through him was introduced to President Trump, who we know the allegation was that he abused her when she was 13, and these are allegations made by Jane Doe 4. Are you aware of Jane Doe 4?
I'm aware of the Jane Doe, the case, Jane Doe.
You're aware of Jane Doe 4?
Aware of the case Jane Doe 4. I'm not aware of the person.
Do you know the identity of Jane Doe 4 in this case?
I don't.
So you do not know the identity of Jane Doe
Sitting here
4?
today, I couldn't tell you.
Okay. Have you ever seen a document with the identity of Jane Doe 4?
I'm sure I must have.
You have seen a document?
I'm sure I must have.
Okay. Now, last week, Mr. Khan, who's the co-executive of the estate, testified that Jane Doe 4 had received a settlement from the Epstein estate, of which you're a co-executor. Mm-hmm. Now, later in the deposition, when oversight staff attorneys asked about the settlement involving Jane Doe 4, Mr. Khan's attorney clarified on the record, according to his team, that Mr. Khan's earlier testimony had been mistaken and that neither he nor Mr. Khan recognized Jane Doe 4 as someone who had filed a claim against the Epstein estate. Now, since then, there's been additional back and forth and confusion about the details of Jane Doe 4 and her interactions with the estate. And there's been back and forth and clarification. So I just want for clarity, since you're a co-executor, now, Mr. Khan, and given your position as a co-executor of the estate for both, did Jane Doe 4 receive a settlement from the estate? So to be clear, as your position as a co-executor of the estate, did Jane Doe 4 receive a settlement from the estate?
So, Congressman Garcia, I have to say two things about anything with Jane Doe's. The first is we're bound by court orders not to say anything about the identity to the extent someone has sued under a Jane Doe name. We're not permitted by court orders to say who the person is at all. Secondly, putting aside whether it's someone as a Jane Doe or someone specifically identified, we are bound in confidentiality requirements in any settlement. We are, as the estate and the co-executors, to not identify if someone has settled or anything about the settlements. Having said that, any of those claimants who have settled, typically they are not bound by that. So, you're free to ask them if they want to identify things, but we cannot do that.
Good.
Aside from the identity and disclosing the identity to us of Jane Doe 4, any NDAs or non-disclosure agreements, as we have made clear in prior cases, Congress does not recognize. And we have the ability to determine whether we do and do not recognize. In this case, given that you were under subpoena, we would ask that you provide us information whether Jane Doe 4 received a settlement.
And let me, I heard you, let me continue.
Yeah, but let me just say to that quickly that putting aside whatever order may come out requiring them to disclose, I believe, but I'd have to look at each particular settlement agreement, we likely have notice provisions to the person settling. If we were bound to disclose it, to first notify that person, because they could probably take.
To be clear, you're not confirming or denying
we
that
cannot.
there's a settlement with Jane Doe 4, is that correct?
We cannot.
So, Mr. Indyke, was there a settlement paid from the Epstein Victim Compensation Program to any Jane Doe or Jane Doe 4?
We have the same
Let me
confidentiality restrictions.
So you're not unwilling to answer if there was actually a payment from the Epstein Victim Compensation?
It's not a willingness issue. It's a bound by confidentiality provisions.
I'm not going to take that premise, but I understand your position. Mr. Indyke, do you have any additional information on Jane Doe 4 that you can provide us?
No.
Okay, great. Mr. Indyke.
Yes.
The Epstein estate has provided documents and productions to this committee per subpoena, as you're aware, and we have welcomed those, of course, and we've gone through those, and we have continued to go through what's been provided. Not all the documents have still been provided to the committee. There's still some documents we believe that are in your possession. Is that correct?
In my possession, personally?
In the possession of the estate.
In response to the subpoena?
In response to the subpoena.
I think based on conversations that council has had with both minority and majority staff, we've complied with what everyone was expecting. If there's more that people were expecting that aren't, let us know.
Are there additional documents with the estate that have not been provided to the committee within the bounds of the subpoena?
Within the bounds of the subpoena? based upon responses, my understanding from counsel is that whatever was agreed upon to be provided has been provided.
Okay, are there additional documents within that the estate has outside the dates of the subpoena, the subpoena was given, that are in possession of the estate?
I'm sorry, outside the dates?
So there,
I
so
apologize, I'm not sure.
the subpoena obviously has dates of when to produce documents, period of time.
Mhm.
Are there documents in the possession of the estate outside the period of time within the subpoena that are in the possession of you and Mr. Khan as the co-executives of the estate?
I'm a little bit at a loss here because, what I did is, what I did and what the
So you won't say,
co-executive.
so what you're saying is you won't answer the question if there's additional
No,
documents in
I'm
your possession.
I'm trying to answer your question, sir. The estate essentially gave the documents to counsel. So I'm a little bit of a loss as to how to answer that question without conferring with counsel and counsel telling me what was it.
I think the question is pretty simple. The subpoena has a period of time. We should be producing documents within that period of time.
Specified document.
Right, specified
We gave you all the documents that were specified.
Correct. So my question is, are there additional documents related to Jeffrey Epstein and communications outside the period of time specified in the subpoena that are in the possession of the Epstein estate?
That you didn't ask for.
That we didn't ask for.
So the subpoena did say,
I
give
think
us
the que-
all the documents in
Correct.
the
The question's really clear. Are there additional documents outside the period of time specified in the subpoena that are in possession of the Epstein estate?
I assume so, yes.
You assume so, yes?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Who next is,
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
My first question, during your employment by Jeffrey Epstein, did you ever become aware of a relationship between Epstein and Donald Trump?
The answer to that question is yes, aware of a relationship that existed before my time.
Okay, did you ever become aware of Donald Trump socializing with Epstein during your employment?
No. Again, my relationship with Epstein was not a social relationship like that. And I don't believe Donald Trump was ever in the office when we were there in New York. And I don't recall off the top of my head whether or not Epstein specifically met with him while I was employed as an attorney for Epstein.
And to confirm, you began your employment with Mr. Epstein in 1996?
1996, yes.
And you said before your time, so you're not aware of any relationship between the two men after 1996?
I am not personally aware of the relationship they had between the time that I was there, from the time that I was there going forward.
Do you believe they had a relationship?
What I recall is that at some point, whatever relationship did exist no longer existed. And I recall that it no longer existed because of some dispute relating to some property in Palm Beach. But I can't tell you what that relationship was from the time I was there going forward, because I don't know.
So you're saying you were not aware of Donald Trump socializing with Epstein. What about with any women connected to Epstein?
I believe that I had learned through a subsequent lawsuit that there was an allegation that President Trump and well, not President Trump at the time, but Donald Trump at the time had some kind of interaction with a person alleging abuse.
Some type of interaction?
I don't recall specific details of it.
When did you become aware of this allegation?
I believe that I received a copy of a lawsuit. So when that lawsuit was filed, then I became aware of it.
Do you have any sense of when that was, what year that was?
It was years ago. I really don't. It was years ago.
But you first said you believe that post 1996, Donald Trump and Epstein did not have a relationship, but at some point after that, you became aware of a lawsuit involving Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein and an allegation made by him.
I believe the allegation in that lawsuit predated the time that I was working for Epstein, I believe. I mean, if somebody could show me the lawsuit, I could read it and see that the
The lawsuit was 2009.
lawsuit was in 2009.
That's when Trump was deposed, and that's when Epstein was scheduled to be deposed.
Okay, do you recall the allegation,
Right.
the date of the allegation?
Have you ever, exactly, they are 90s. Have you ever discussed Donald Trump's connection to Epstein with anyone?
Other than privileged conversations that I've had.
Meaning with his lawyers, not, is that what you're
Right.
talking about?
Correct.
During your employment by Epstein, did you ever become aware of Donald Trump visiting a property owned by Epstein, either in New York, New Mexico, Paris, Ireland?
No.
During your employment by Epstein, did you ever become aware of the relationship between Epstein and Howard Lutnick?
No, I didn't know that there was a relationship between Epstein and Howard Lutnick.
So you weren't aware that Mr. Lutnick was Epstein's next door neighbor in Manhattan?
Yes, but that, I was aware that he was a neighbor in Manhattan, but I wasn't aware that they actually had a relationship.
Okay, I believe that's my time.
Congressman Inman?
Thank you. I'm going to hand you a copy of an exhibit, Exhibit A. And this is a consent order issued by the New York State Department of Financial Services regarding Deutsche Bank in July of 2020. I'd like you to turn to page 16, paragraph 48. And that reads, several of Mr. Epstein's employees or agents had authority to conduct transactions in the accounts on Mr. Epstein's behalf. One of them, Mr. Epstein's personal attorney, was active in withdrawing cash from Mr. Epstein. Attorney 1, on behalf of Mr. Epstein, made a total of 97 withdrawals from the bank's Park Avenue, New York City branch from 2013 to 2017 for personal accounts belonging to Mr. Epstein. So my first question for you, Mr. Indyke, is Attorney 1 here listed, is that you?
I believe that's me, yes.
And can you explain why you were making these withdrawals?
At this time, there was a great deal of negative publicity about.
Was this done at the direction of Mr. Epstein? I guess I'll start there.
But, all right.
Well,
I would like him to answer the question, if the question is asked, I know, but he has an answer to a serious allegation.
No, I'm asking first, were these at the direction of Mr. Epstein?
Okay.
No, I do not believe that they were at the direction of Mr. Epstein.
Okay. Do you know what the cash was used for?
I don't have a specific knowledge of what the cash in each instance was used for, but I know generally, or believe generally, that when I made cash withdrawals, they were for things, for petty cash to supply the households for supplies, for cleaning supplies, food.
You gave the cash to who then?
Just to be clear, I don't think he was done. That's okay. I just want the record to be clear. That he had, I know, but you can't, but if he's not allowed to answer the questions, it doesn't matter.
Redirect him.
Okay, but just to be clear, he wasn't done. If you want to go on, that's fine.
I'm asking a follow-up question here, which was the cash, who actually received the cash?
The cash went to the accounting department.
Accounting department of Mr. Epstein.
So there was an office down the hall from my office where the accounting function for Mr. Epstein and his homes was performed. Somebody from the accounting office would ask me for to go to the bank to get money for the petty cash, and the petty cash would service the various households. There were 5 different households, and I would go to the bank with a check drawn on Mr. Epstein's account. The bank knew it was from Mr. Epstein's account. And I would get the cash and give it back to the accounting department.
This is a lot of cash, I just want to note, $7,500 per withdrawal. And that would be 97 withdrawals. That is, over the course of 16 months, a total of over $725,000 in cash.
Just to be clear, that paragraph says it's 4 years, not 16 months.
60.
I'm sorry, I misheard. Thank you.
4 years or so, 16 months. That's a lot of cash, $725,000.
It's a large amount of cash.
As a lawyer, did that not concern you or raise any red flags?
Well, if you knew that Mr. Epstein had 5 multi-million-dollar residences, or 6 actually with the other island, had dozens of staff members, didn't have use of credit cards, all of those residences had lots of rooms, lots of people working there that needed food, that needed supplies, that needed equipment, that needed tools.
To your knowledge, was any of that, and I'm only saying this, sir, because I'm running out of time, was any of that money used to give cash payments to women or young girls?
I just want the record to be clear that he had not finished his prior answer, but go ahead.
So I did not believe that any amount of cash that I gave to the accounting department was going to be used for an improper purpose. I believe that there were legitimate reasons to bring that cash in, and I did so.
Now, I want to switch topics here. Did you have any kind of written representation agreement with Mr. Epstein for the scope of your services as an attorney, a retainer agreement, anything like that?
I believe at some point I did.
Now, that's not available in the files that were produced to us. Is that
I
something?
don't know that I actually have it anymore.
You don't have it anymore, okay. What were the terms of your scope of representation and also your payment agreement with Mr. Epstein?
The payment was decided on an annual basis. It wasn't decided.
Not upfront, not based on hour?
No.
Just whatever he decided to pay you, that's what you received?
The answer is yes, but he had always been generous with me, so I didn't have any reason to doubt it.
He was very generous with you. So from 2003 to 2013, according to public reports, your personal bank account received more than $2.4 million from Epstein, while your business account received over $8.3 million. You also received a loan that was never repaid of $7 million, and a copy of Mr. Epstein's trust showed that he planned to leave you $50 million, 50, which was matched only by his girlfriend, Karina Chuliak. What were you doing for him that made him so generous to you?
I think I've already discussed all of the things that I did for Mr. Epstein, which were all legitimate legal tasks. I was working for him at least 6 days a week, sometimes 7 days a week. I was on call 24 hours a day with him. And I was not at liberty to take on other clients in a way that other lawyers in private practice would want to take on clients to continue their business.
At the end of my time, that's a lot of money. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you. Congressman Stansbury.
Hi.
So I represent Albuquerque, New Mexico, and Zorro Ranch is just north of my congressional district. And as you're probably aware, New Mexico has opened a truth commission and reopened the criminal investigations into what happened at the ranch. So my questions are primarily fact-finding, less so much about your specific role, but really about the ranch and the investigations and why DOJ asked the state to drop their case. I also have a follow-up question about Trump as well as your work on the defense team. So that's kind of the scope of what I want to ask about. So as I understand it, you helped to manage the assets at Zorro Ranch, is that correct?
I wouldn't say I helped to manage the assets.
Were you involved in any
Now as co-executor or back then?
Were you involved in any legal or financial matters over the course of your employment with Jeffrey Epstein and Zorro Ranch?
I was,
You
yes.
were. Did you ever travel there?
I've traveled to the ranch, I want to say 2 or 3 times.
Are you aware that there are multiple allegations that were taken by the FBI of sexual abuse at the ranch?
I have been made aware of those allegations, yes.
Were you involved in any way, legal or financial, in the defense of Mr. Epstein, either in a state case or a federal case at the ranch?
No.
You-
A civil case?
You were involved in a civil
In
case?
a civil case, and I believe there was a case relating to there was a grazing lease that was taken away.
But in any of the sexual abuse cases?
No.
Do you have any personal knowledge or can you share with us why DOJ asked the state of New Mexico to drop its investigation into sexual abuse?
I have no personal knowledge of that.
I want to move on to a follow-up question on Trump and this suit that was filed by a young woman against both Trump and Epstein for abuse at her house. As I understand it, looking at both the responsive documents that the estate sent us, as well as separately the DOJ's files, it appears to me that these are 2 separate cases. Is that true?
Could you repeat the question?
So it appears to me that the Jane Doe 4 FBI files that the federal government is tracking, in which a young woman was interviewed 4 times by the FBI for abuse at Jeffrey Epstein's New York estate, is a separate case from the lawsuit that was filed in 2009 against Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump. Is that true?
I don't know.
You don't, okay. Did you help to process the files from the estate that were sent to the committee?
The answer to your question is I did.
Yes. Okay, so you're aware that in the files there's,
No, that I did not.
you did not. Who
So
processed?
the files, all of the files from the estate went over to the lawyers with instructions to comply with all lawful requests.
So it was handled by an outside firm rather than you?
Was handled by the law firm.
Okay, did you review the document?
Not the volume of documents that I reviewed.
But you are aware, as was just established, that there was a lawsuit in 2009, and there's documentation in the files that were transmitted from the estate that actually state that Epstein was scheduled for a deposition in that case, correct?
I am aware, certainly aware
Yeah.
now. And
I
I was aware,
documents
generally of the case. I think I was aware of, at some point that there was a request for a deposition.
Epstein actually deposed, these are scheduling documents that came from the estate. Was he deposed in that
I
case?
don't believe he was, no.
Do you know why?
I don't know.
Okay, so that goes to my final set of questions, which is, did you personally or anyone that you worked with make any payments or financial transfers to any lawyers, law enforcement officers, DOJ, or state attorneys involved in cases against Jeffrey Epstein for sexual abuse?
Say that one more time, because that's a lot to unpack. So,
I think just to be clear, because you asked lawyers, so do you mean lawyers for some government in that question?
Yeah.
Okay, that's.
Okay, I'll ask it slightly